Amendment desk, it's Graves, I think it's 17.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of substitute to the committee print offered by Mr. Graves of Louisiana, number 017.
Without objection, it's considered as read. Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes to discuss his amendment.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, what this does is it simply makes an amendment to the bill to amend the eligibility of interest cost incurred by state or local governments in the aftermath of a disaster. Let me be clear, Mr. Chairman. After a disaster happens, local governments, not only is their tax base often pounded, their community pounded, economic implications, tax implications, but also what happens is that FEMA often takes several months. I'm sorry?
No, you're fine.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I thought you were telling me to stop. Several months or even years before the reimbursement comes through. Many of these local governments that we represent don't have the wherewithal to float these types of costs from these extraordinary events. My friend from Florida, Congressman Neil Dunn, has highlighted the need for this, particularly in his community after, I believe it was Hurricane Michael, if I recall, pounded the Florida Panhandle. We have instances where some reimbursements have gone on for 8 years or greater. And so these local governments are carrying this load or burden during this time. So this would simply make the disaster relief funds eligible to cover the cost of that interest as a result of these local governments carrying a loan to keep them afloat while they wait for the reimbursement of costs they've incurred from FEMA. So very simple explanation, Mr. Chairman. I tried to interject during Mr. Webster's amendment. I want to correct the record on one thing. There was a comment that was made saying that the disaster relief fund is never earmarked. Actually, that's not really accurate. So right now, under the hazard mitigation grant program, anywhere from 7.5% to 20% of the aggregate cost of individual and public assistance is returned back to those impacted communities in the form of hazard mitigation grant program dollars. And so there is a specific set aside in federal law today that sets aside funds for that purpose. Similarly, something that I know you and I worked together on just 3 years ago was the BRIC program. And so this is similar to the pre-disaster mitigation program, yet we wanted to ensure stable and predictable funding. So you and I and some other folks worked together with then Schuster, Chairman Schuster, to set aside 6% of aggregate costs to go toward pre-disaster mitigation through the BRIC program. So there have been funds in the past that have been set aside through the disaster relief fund. In this case, this simply is an eligibility item, and I think it's the right thing to do for our governments. I urge, for our state and local governments, and I urge adoption of the amendment. Yield back.
Are there other